Welcome to A Senior Moment, quick info on the issues facing older adults today. In this episode, we explore the cost of caregiving, both financial and emotional. Hi. So first, I want to talk about the cost of caregiving. But before we get into the actual financial piece of it, I really want to get some kind of base info, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Alzheimer's and related dementia. Because when we think about caregiving, usually that's really, I mean, people with disabilities also sometimes need care, but it's a lot easier to get care for somebody who is living with a disability than for somebody who is suffering from dementia. So, just to start off with, 6 million Americans currently live with Alzheimer's disease, and Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. There are many other types. But dementia kills more people than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined, and it's the sixth leading cause of death in the US. And that means that it's not that dementia actually actively kills you, but what it does is it shuts down your brain's functions. And so, what actually might kill you is that you stop breathing, or that your liver stops working the way it's supposed to, or something else. So, it's kind of the catalyst to something else that may actually cause death. And by 2050, the number of Americans diagnosed with Alzheimer's is going to rise to nearly 14 million. So, it's going to more than double in the next 30 years. So, when we think about dementia, looking at the brains, the normal brain you can see there on the left is a healthy brain, and the one on the right is obviously the Alzheimer's brain. And you can see how much mass is actually lost, how much actual brain structure changes when someone's living with Alzheimer's disease. And the brain actually loses about a third of its weight. And that's just because those brain cells are dying, and those areas of the brain that control different functions of your body are they're not working anymore. So when we look at a PET scan that we see here, anything you see in red is activity. So on the far left-hand side, you can see a lot of red in the brain. But as you move into early and late Alzheimer's disease, you see a lot more blue. And if you notice, that late Alzheimer's brain has the same or very similar patterns to that of a child. So that child is, I believe it's an 18-month-old child scan there. And all of these other ones are 70-year-olds, I think, that these brain scans came from. So you can see that you really have to shift how you're caring for somebody when they're living with Alzheimer's disease, as opposed to a different kind of disability. 16 million Americans currently provide unpaid care for those living with dementia, and it's estimated that unpaid caregivers spend 18.5 billion hours providing care for those who are living with dementia. And that's a total value of $234 billion. So that includes things like lost wages, that someone is not able to work because they're spending all of their time caregiving for someone that they love. And every 65 seconds, someone in the US develops dementia. So what's the actual financial cost of care in the United States? And these are averages, so it can change depending on where someone lives. But to have home care, to have somebody come into your home and help you with tasks, and that's a non-medical person. So that's not a nurse coming into your home. That's just a paid caregiver from an agency, for example. Average is $23 per hour, or $1,000 a week. To take a person to adult day services, if they're even available in your area, cost about $75 a day. So that's actually a pretty good value when you consider the cost of home care. If you have adult day services in your area, that might actually be a way to go when it comes to caring for someone who you love with dementia. Assisted living facilities can cost $4,000 a month, or almost $50,000 a year. And nursing facilities are even more expensive, at about $280 a day, or $100,000 a year. And if you share a room with somebody in a nursing home, it drops that down about $12,000 to $90,000 a year. So it's really, really expensive to provide care to someone as they're living with dementia. So who do caregivers take care of? Most of the time, people are taking care of their parents. The vast majority, you can see there, 60%. But between all those others, spouse or domestic partner and sibling are actually a pretty large chunk when you add them together. About a quarter of people are taking care of a spouse or a sibling. And usually a caregiver is a female. Oftentimes it's women who care for people in their lives. And odds are you're going to be over the age of 60. Certainly you're going to be over the age of 50. But usually people in middle age have to start taking care of those that they love. And usually it's for financial reasons. They can't afford to pay for those caregivers that they might need, or some people may not want to go and live in an assisted living facility for a variety of reasons. So when we look at the cost on a caregiver's emotional state, so we've kind of covered the financial cost, but there's other costs associated with caring for somebody, and that involves the cost of the person providing the care. It comes down to their health. So looking at common feelings, people feel a lot of depression, stress, loneliness. They might feel resentment. They also might feel fulfilled or satisfied by what they're doing. If they're having a good day with their person and they finally, got them to take a shower when they haven't showered in a week, it can feel really great to do that. People can also feel overwhelmed or frustrated, or feeling out of balance with their caregiving duties, and that can lead to a lot of other complications. People can feel like they're being squeezed. So like I said, especially during that middle-aged period of your life, you may have adult children that are not quite fully fledged on their own, or they may be bringing their kids over to grandma and grandpa's house so that they can have a break from their children, but you also may be having your parents who need some sort of care, and people can feel really locked in and squeezed between those two family members. So this leads us to caregiver burden. Caregiver burden is something that sounds bad, and it really is, and it's not a judgment that providing care is a burden. People don't want to feel that, and certainly people being cared for don't want to feel like they're a burden to somebody else. But there is a toll, there is work that goes into this, and what can happen if somebody is experiencing caregiver burden is they can be at 63% greater risk of death, and sometimes the caregiver actually dies before the person they're caring for because they're not taking care of their own health. They're not going to their own doctor's appointment because they're too busy taking their loved one to their own doctor's appointment. And it can cost a lot of money. Like we mentioned before, nationwide, it's a hundreds of billion dollar industry. But for an individual, it can cost as much as $56,000 a year to care for somebody full time because you're not engaging in work that you may otherwise be engaged with. And caregivers experience fatigue, frustration. We talked about that a minute ago. And 2/3 of them felt despair as a result of their caregiving experience, and said that it put a strain on their marriage, whether that be caring for their spouse or whether it be caring for a parent while married. It can provide a strain on a marriage just in general. And as I talked about, there's an emotional and physical toll of stress. So everybody probably knows that when we get stressed out, our blood pressure increases, the chemicals in our body increase, our respiratory rate increases. It can lead to heart issues. So there's lots of physical tolls that the emotional toll can take and kind of lead to. People feel like they're on call because when you're caring for a loved one, oftentimes, we might move mom into our house so that we can more easily care for them. But now that means that we're on call all of the time. And it feels a lot like being a parent, but there isn't any respite involved in that because oftentimes, even if you're a stay-at-home parent, you might be sending your children off to school, or they may be going on play dates with friends or staying the night at others' houses, or you may be able to take them to grandma and grandpa's house. But if you're taking care of your spouse especially, or a parent who's moved in with you, you don't have that respite that you might otherwise have. And it really changes the role that you have with your person. So if I'm caring for my mother who has dementia, I'm no longer her son. Now I am a caregiver, and it can really mess with family dynamics. And risk factors for caregiver stress and caregiver burden, as we talked about, is usually you're a woman and you're over the age of 55. Living with the person you're caring for can be a big risk factor in being overly stressed. Depression and isolation, which can be byproducts of caregiving, can lead to higher stress and burnout for caregivers. So what do we need to do about it? So the thing that we can do about caregiver stress and how to take care of ourselves is called self-care. And it's really important. It's taking the time to take care of yourself so that you can take care of the other person. So I'm sure many people have been on an airplane, and before the airplane takes off, the flight attendant gets on the intercom and starts talking about the safety procedures. So, in case of a water landing, your seat cushion, blah, blah, blah. But one thing they'll talk about is that if there's a sudden loss of cabin pressure, masks will fall from the ceiling. And they say, put your own mask on first before assisting others. And that means even if you have a child with you, you need to put your own mask on, because if you pass out, you're no good to anybody else on the plane. So put your own mask on and then get the mask on anybody that you're caring for. And the same thing applies to caregiving. If you break down because you are being overworked, you're not going to be any help to anybody else. So you might as well take care of yourself first so that you can be the best caregiver that you can be. And if you're getting support, you're going to have reduced stress and depression. You're going to get more knowledge and skills by talking to others or getting training. You're going to help avert crisis situations and calls to maybe emergency services or care managers. It's just going to make things run more smoothly in your life. This has been a senior moment. Thanks for watching, and look out for more senior moments in the future.